Dennis O'Rourke.
Mr Speaker, the government's budget this year is accurately described as the boring budget. No doubt the lolly bag will be opened next year before the next election. This budget fails to address the major economic and social issues facing New Zealand. It is boring because it achieves very little. What the budget exposed is that the government does not actually have a coherent economic policy. There is no economic vision, no economic plan for improving the lives of ordinary Kiwis. Instead, all we get is deals with specific interests or lobby groups, Sky City, Warner Brothers, China Southern Airlines and so on. For example, it has now been revealed that Treasury warned government back in November 2011 that the private benefits to Sky City would exceed the public benefits. But National are blatant in ignoring any advice or any information contrary to their agenda. Then there are the other deals like selling state assets. So assets go from being public assets into the hands of a few. Everything is up for sale. Our land and assets, our laws, and even our citizenship. And those deals have one characteristic: they favour the few, the wealthy few at the expense of the New Zealand public as a whole. In fact, the Sky City deal is likely to be the defining event of John Key's government. In all its sleaze, corner-cutting, manipulation of process, trashing of the public interest, it will stand as an ignominious and outrageous legacy of the John Key government. It really is a shocker. In their contract with Sky City, they have stitched up subsequent New Zealand governments for another 27 years. They have also effectively killed the Aotea Centre as a convention centre at a cost of who knows how many millions to the ratepayers of Auckland. And this is from a Prime Minister who touts his financial savvy and prowess. Unemployment, Mr Speaker, remains a huge problem for New Zealand, and it is no excuse that other countries are worse. The budget offered little comfort for unemployed people in New Zealand. At the end of March 2013, nearly 150,000 New Zealanders were unemployed. That is an appalling amount of wasted human potential and productivity. With high levels of unemployment, a rational government would put the brakes on immigration and drastically reduce the number of immigrants. But this government gave temporary work visas to 140,000 people in the year to mid-2012. That is a staggering number of jobs. In the case of Chinese migrants, parent category migrants outnumbered skilled migrants by a ratio of 2 to 1. In contrast, New Zealand First policy is for a rigorous and strictly applied immigration policy. We say immigration policy should be based on New Zealand's interests, and the main focus should be on meeting critical skills gaps. Unlike this government, we would put Kiwi workers at the front of the job queue. Mr Speaker, housing is the single biggest problem facing New Zealand today. The government's budget measures on housing policy are actually a mess and fail to deal with the housing crisis, especially in Auckland and Christchurch, where there are severe housing shortages, and first home buyers especially have no hope of buying a home. In a home-owning democracy, which New Zealand has always been, this is a national disgrace. The Housing Accords legislation would be all right as far as it goes, with some modifications in establishing special housing areas, but it doesn't go far enough. In Auckland, there is a need for at least 12,000 new houses per year, and there's already a housing deficit there of well over 30,000 houses. Under the government's plans, there is a probability of no more than 10,000 houses per year, if that. On that basis, there will never be a catch-up. But the worst is that young people seeking a first home will not be assisted by this government to get a home of their own under this budget. To make matters worse, it is highly likely the Reserve Bank will shortly limit the quantum of high loan-to-value ratio mortgages that the trading banks can make. This is a flawed policy too, a second-best strategy. Normally the Reserve Bank would raise interest rates, but that can't be done without raising an already overvalued New Zealand dollar. If the LVR mortgage limitation does happen, many first homers on low incomes can kiss goodbye to home ownership in this country. The Reserve Bank doesn't care, and this government doesn't care either, and it will do nothing to deter property investors and speculators who have been buying up Auckland property and who also have ample equity already. And it does nothing about the migrant flows which have been concentrated in Auckland. And it does nothing to tighten immigration policy in areas such as parental reunion, which have added significantly to housing demand in Auckland. It is not the first home buyers who have caused the housing bubble, but they will be the most heavily penalised sector by limits on LVR lending. The government's policies overall are to blame for this situation. Over the last 4 years, the government has allowed a housing price bubble to emerge by its inept immigration and housing policies. Only a comprehensive housing strategy designed to address both demand and supply factors, as advocated by New Zealand First, will make housing affordable for first home buyers. New Zealand First supports a broadly based housing policy that will make home ownership a reality again rather than just a dream for ordinary New Zealanders. New Zealand First policy to assist first home seekers is to establish a new state agency to acquire land where demand clearly exceeds supply, to sell residential sections of modest size on long-term agreements for sale and purchase up to 25 years to first home seekers, and with concessionary 2% interest rates for an initial period of 3 years. Purchasers would build their own houses using normal bank financing. The government's special housing areas are not enough. New Zealand can do better with New Zealand First policy on housing. Another New Zealand First policy which should be adopted is to put the brakes on foreign speculators pushing up Kiwi house prices. This was recently copied by Labour, I'm glad to see. The only difference is that we would not allow exemptions based on nationality. Labour says it will exempt Australians. New Zealand First would apply this policy across the board. There won't be any exemptions based on nationality or race or any other form of discrimination. We will stop all non-residents from buying both existing houses and sections for houses. Mr. Speaker, the justification is clear. We know that some foreign nationals can get very cheap loans not available to Kiwis, and these people can therefore outbid Kiwis in the house property market, especially in Auckland. But to make matters worse, this government allows parent reunion category immigrants under Tier 1 to have fast-tracked entry into New Zealand if they bring in at least 500,000 with them. So National's witless immigration policy also makes the Auckland housing problem worse. Mr. Speaker, New Zealand must regulate the foreign ownership of residential property if it is to fully address the Auckland housing market and problem. This year's budget was a wasted opportunity. It exposed just how incapable the government is of getting to grips with the economic challenges facing New Zealand.
Paul Goldsmith.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker.